As we saw in our last class, number 1, based on the way that we tune our musical instruments, if we start on a C and end on a C and play all naturals, no sharps or flats or no black notes, we'll have a C major scale. So we're going to stay in the key of C. C is our home. That's our one note, and we're going to go in the key of C major. This will be our scale notes again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and back to the 8. So here's what a triad is. A triad is a chord with 3 notes. In the key of C, there are 7 triads. What we do is we play every other note. So if you look the way my fingers are right now, this is the first, second, third, fourth, fifth finger. My first and third finger are on the first and third note of the major scale or key. And my fifth finger is in the fifth note. And that's our first triad or chord. A triad is a chord, but not all chords are triads. Some chords can have more notes than 3. A lot more notes than 3. But a triad is a chord with 3 notes. So it's the most basic version of a chord. Now a chord or a triad is simply every other note being played together. We call this the root of the chord. We call this the third of the chord because if you remember from last class, this is a major third apart. And we call this the fifth of the chord because if you remember from last class, the root and the fifth note are a fifth apart. So this would be the root, the third, and the fifth of a triad. When we describe the notes of a triad, we're going to label them as such. So there are 7 notes in the C major scale, 7 notes in the key of C major. So there will be 7 triads, each one starting on each note. So this is starting on the 1 note. So we call this the 1 chord. This is the root of the chord. This is the third of the chord because they're 3 notes apart, 1, 2, 3. And then this is the fifth of the chord because it's 5 notes away from the root, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is the root, the third, and the fifth of the triad. And since we're starting on the first note of the scale, we call that the 1 chord. Now let's look at the 7 chords in a major key. This would be a 1 chord because it's starting on the first note of the scale. A 2 chord, the second note of the scale. A 3 or E chord, third note of the scale. 4 chord, or the fourth note of the scale. The 5 chord in the major key. The 6th chord in the major key. The 7th chord in the major key. And back to 1. First chord, the 4th chord, and the 5th chord are going to be major chords. And the 2 chord, the 3 chord, and the 6 chord are going to be minor chords. I call that because we're starting on the second note of the scale. A triad starting on the third note of the scale. And a triad starting on the 6th note of the scale. So in a major key, the 1, 4, and 5 chord are normally major. And the 2, 3, and 6 chords are normally minor. And we'll learn the 7th chord in another class. That's a diminished chord. We don't need to know that right now.